Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Microsoft Flight Simulator, also known as Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, the newest edition of Microsoft's well-known flight simulator franchise. And with that, welcome to the newest Flying Kayak Flying Vlog. Today, I've got something, well, rather special for you. This simulator was just released a few months ago, and I thought it would be super interesting to take a look at it and fly around a bit. Fly around in an area that I actually know fairly well, because this is the area that I currently live in. So we're going to depart from Stuttgart Airport and go ahead and fly around to some of the smaller regional airports surrounding Stuttgart Airport. Currently, we're situated on the runway in a Cessna 152. A very small training airplane, but I thought that would be just the perfect aircraft to fly around the sim and to talk about the topic of today's flight simulator flying vlog, which is VFR flight in a flight simulator and how that actually works and feels now with the new Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Alright, I'm just going to quickly jump over into the cockpit here. I do hope that I got the sound settings correct enough for you guys to kind of hear what I'm saying over the sound of the engine and all that stuff. This is a really simple airplane. I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can turn on my cockpit lighting, as it is fairly dark outside. There's a big cloud, I believe, that's straight above us. I really like you can hide the yokes here. That's really cool. It doesn't seem to be much in terms of cockpit lights. It is a very simple airplane after all. Let me just quickly reset my view. Alright. So, I'm going to put in one notch of flaps and add some power. Releasing the parking brake. Oh boy. And there we go. We're rolling. Now, for some reason, Microsoft Flight Simulator thinks that there is actually a thunderstorm ongoing right now in or near Stuttgart. It is, from looking out my window, that I can tell you that there is most definitely not a thunderstorm going on around Stuttgart at the moment, or at least not around the area where I am. I do live a bit further away from the international airport, so yeah, it could well be that there is a thunderstorm at the international airport, but I don't think so. Anyways, yeah, that was a current departure from Stuttgart International Airport. Now, in the real world, a lot of the airplanes out there fly VFR, or Visual Flight Rules. Now, I did create an explanation video explaining what VFR is and how it contrasts with IFR, which is Instrument Flight Rules, which is something that a lot of people in flight simulators enjoy flying a lot of the time. And this new simulator does offer a very interesting kind of new feature set, which mainly is that you can now fly VFR in a flight simulator, and you can actually do it realistically. Previous iterations of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and previous iterations of almost any flight simulator, including the X-Plane series, had one kind of big issue, which was that while they were very realistic in terms of flight model, and you could create amazingly realistic system simulations in them, what they lacked was a realistic world simulation. So it was very difficult to actually realistically recreate the entire surroundings of any given place on Earth, and that's kind of the most important thing for VFR flying, because with VFR flying, unlike IFR flying, what you do is you look out the window and you determine where you are and what you're doing based upon landmarks that you would find on the ground. And that is something that Microsoft Flight Simulator does very well, because it derives its landmarks from satellite imagery. And that's a big difference when you compare it to, for example, X-Plane, which does that a little bit, but also mainly kind of does an automatically generated scenery area. That procedurally generated kind of world works perfectly well if you're trying to recognize big landmarks like cities or forests and stuff like that, but what you can't really recognize in those big areas is singular landmarks like towers or houses or specific shapes or roof colors and stuff like that. All of that is, in fact, fairly important to VFR flying because that is what you would use to kind of determine where you are and where you're going and what you're doing. Just like what I'm doing now, which is basically following the VFR route, or well, not a VFR route, I'm just basically following the road that I would normally drive from the airport to the city I currently live in, which is the Autobahn that is just below me. I'm just going to try and see if I could go into the external view here. It'd be that road over there. That's kind of the road that I would follow normally if I were to drive home from the airport. And I'm kind of just following that up to that big crossroads straight ahead. And then I'm going to follow that crossroads to the airport that is nearest to my city. Oh, look at that. There's some air traffic control chatter, actually. Can I kind of pop that up? I don't know. I haven't been using this simulator a lot, so I'm not really familiar yet with all of its features. I have tried to put in a few hours of flying in this sim in order to give you guys kind of a sensible first impression of the simulator. And that is basically already, for me personally, the biggest change and the biggest promise that this simulator has, and that is realistic VFR flying. For the first time in history, more or less, oh dear, I think that's air traffic control trying to talk to me. I don't like to use the in-game ATC a lot. Because when I try to use ATC, I would usually rather go with VATSIM or IVEO, as they provide super realistic ATC services, and the in-game ATC in all flight simulators I know of is usually not really the best. And I'm not doing a good job of flying at the moment, I'm sorry guys, but I'm just kind of trying to give you guys a bit of an overview over what I'm trying to talk about with this flight simulator. More or less, VFR navigation is something that wasn't really honestly possible in most areas of other modern flight sims, like for example in Flight Simulator X or in X-Plane 11. But in FS 2020, for the first time really, I have this feeling that VFR navigation is really possible, and it's fun, and it's actually realistic. And that, I believe, is the biggest kind of difference, the biggest kind of jump that is made with this new flight simulator, which really changes the way that a lot of people will use the flight simulator. It already has changed the way, in my opinion, that the flight sim community is using this simulator, because I've seen a lot more posts online, a lot more articles, and a lot more content concerning VFR flying and bush flying trips and landing in places where you wouldn't normally land. And that vastly opposes the previous kind of airliner flying and IFR flying mainstream of flight simulation, which is a very different type of flying, which was of course previously very realistically possible in older sims. Now that's really fun actually. I really like flying around VFR in the flight sim, and if you want to do VFR the proper way with all those reporting points and talking to ATC correctly, all of which I'm not really doing at the moment because yeah, I'm just kind of trying to give you an overview here. If you want to really do that and really take your time, then VFR and IFR are not really all that different in terms of complexity and in terms of workload. You really have to concentrate whether you're flying under visual flight rules or whether you're flying under instrument flight rules. Doesn't really make a big difference. A few of the things that you can definitely notice and definitely kind of say when you're considering, oh look, there's some sort of tower over there. That's really cool. A few of the things that you can definitely notice and definitely say with a new flight simulator is that the world generation procedure is definitely awesome. I really enjoy the way that FS 2020 generates the world and generates a very realistic picture. I've actually been able to locate my house and my friend's house and fly over it and locate important landmarks in or near my home, which is really awesome because, yeah, that's really cool. You can actually do that from the air. I've also been able to fly to a few local airfields that I happen to know and fly towards those airfields and take a look at the surroundings, and everything around these airfields is represented in a very realistic way, and that really allows for realistic procedures. So you can basically fly to that airfield using the same VFR landmarks that real-world pilots would use, and you can orient yourself, and that also makes this simulator a fairly useful training aid. You can take a look at that and see those landmarks and familiarize yourself with an area before you've ever flown through that area, and that is another big advantage, in my opinion, that you have, that you can really kind of familiarize yourself with that area, even if you're not an IFR pilot, but if you're just trying to fly around VFR, and that's all fun stuff. Now, of course, this new simulator definitely has its shortcomings. It has a few bugs that are known. The autopilot behavior was quirky up until a few weeks ago. I've only tested the autopilot once. I really enjoy hand flying aircraft in this simulator. I'm hand flying currently. And, well, the autopilot did kind of attempt to fly my plane into the ground halfway through the flight, which is not what an autopilot should be doing, so that's a bit of a problem. But other than that, actually, I'm really happy with the flight simulator. What I've also noticed is that the Garmin G1000 in FS 2020 wasn't really good. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it was represented. I felt the colors were off, and I felt that the system itself seemed with a bit less simulation depth than other systems that we've seen in flight simulators, like for example the X-Plane 11 Garmin G1000, which I really enjoy using a lot and which I also like to use when I'm trying to fly realistically online on VATSIM or stuff like that. And those are a few small shortcomings. I haven't really tried airliners yet, so I can't talk about airliners and the system's fidelity yet. But I do think that we'll have to wait for big payware companies to produce fairly realistic airliners to see an actual sensible benefit and to see actual study level airliners implemented into the game. But I think that is something that's fairly obvious because kind of study level airliners, the sort of study level airliners that we've seen released for FSX or X-Plane 11, they really take years of research and programming, and they're very, very complex. And something like that is out of the scope that any simulation producer can possibly do. And what the simulation producer, in this case Microsoft, does is it creates the world that we fly in, and then the aircraft are supplied by third parties, and that's okay. And that's actually really fun, and that's one of the things that makes these simulators so incredibly unique. Now, what I'm currently doing is I'm arriving at a waypoint fairly close to a regional airport. I'm just gonna kind of try and do a circle here. And I'll go see if I can find a few of the approach waypoints and land. Alright, so there are a few small disadvantages that this simulator does have, and things that aren't perfect yet. But a lot of the things that are implemented in the sim are done really well. I like the way that the flight model feels. At the beginning it wasn't perfect, but they did bring out an update, and with that update the flight model, especially on general aviation aircraft like this Cessna 152, does actually feel fairly realistic. It definitely is a great improvement over the FSX or prepared flight model, with the flight model feeling much less like flying on rails and much more like, well, what I would expect an actual aircraft to feel like. What I've got to say though is that I still think that the X-Plane 11 flight model is a bit more realistic in terms of the way it's calculated, but that's a minuscule difference that honestly isn't all that easy to recognize. Alright, so let's just see. Currently kind of turning here. Okay. So basically my goal right now is to descend and to find a few approach waypoints. So straight ahead, if I am correct, yeah, looks like I might be correct. That straight ahead there is a water tower that is used as an approach waypoint to a regional airfield in my area. So I'm going to fly towards that water tower and kind of use that as my first waypoint, and then the second waypoint would be a car drive-in cinema, and then I'm going to basically fly down and land at the runway, or I'm at least going to attempt it. So let's see if that works according to plan. Anyways, what I was talking about was the way that this flight simulator really kind of changes the way that a lot of people use it and use this flight simulator for VFR travel and VFR flying, and it's really awesome. I really like it. Anyways, and in general, that's kind of the biggest benefits that this flight simulator has over other flight simulators, is that it offers realistic VFR kind of flight, something that other flight sims cannot yet manage. In the IFR department and the systems department, it's probably still got a bit of, well, stuff to do. It's not perfect yet, by no means, and it's going to probably take it a while until it is perfect. But until then, it's definitely fun to fly around according to visual flight rules. Alright, so pretty much straight ahead. I think we've got the runway there. Gonna try and descend and slow down. Oh boy, I'm way too fast and way too high, I think. Yeah, I don't need to think that. I know that. Oh boy, I'm kind of descending over this golf course, avoiding the built-up residential areas where people obviously don't want to hear all the noise of the aircraft passing over them all the time. There we go, turning onto final here. Yeah, I'll probably have to go around on this one. Yep, I'm not happy with this approach. Anyways, I'm going to go around, and I'm actually going to try and land from the other side, because that's probably actually going to be the better side considering winds currently. Anyways, to kind of recapitulate what I think about the new sim and about the new way of flying in the simulator, is I really enjoy the fact that VFR navigation is so awesome and possible in this new flight simulator. I think that's a great addition to the flight sim world, and I think that if in a few years with a few updates, a few things have upgraded, stuff like the avionics systems or aircraft systems in general, and maybe a few more performance tweaks, then this is going to be a really great flight sim in which a lot of fun is to be had. So yeah, definitely stay tuned to see more content of mine on this flight simulator, and I hope that you can enjoy. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and try the landing once again from the other side, a bit more into the wind. I wish you guys safe travels, blue skies, and many happy landings, and I hope that you enjoy this episode of the Flying Kayak Flying Vlog, and I hope that you enjoy your virtual and real flights, and I wish you safe flights always. Okay, so if you are sticking around to watch me attempt and hopefully not fail again at this landing, I'm basically gonna start. Well, that was a bit violent on the rudder there. Oh boy, yeah, the rudder sensitivity is probably a bit high. I'm gonna start kind of steeper turn around here, turning back towards the Neckar River and the airfield. Okay. It's really kind of difficult to see outside, probably because of that big cloud that's obscuring all the light. Okie dokie. Dum da dum da dum da dum. Okay, I've got the runway straight ahead. Alright, so now we're pretty much established on a final for our landing. The wind should be coming from the south, so I'm gonna have to kinda use my crab angle to stay on center line. I'm really high at the moment, so I can easily drift or glide down a bit. There are some power lines in the approach. Don't know if you can see those. It's really difficult. Kind of over here is the tower, so we gotta make sure that we avoid those. Other than that, nothing too challenging, aside from a small runway. Let's go and see if I can make it this time. This is already the second try to just get this plane landed on the ground. Oh boy. Woo, okay. So that crosswind was actually much more challenging to master than I thought. Anyways, we made it onto the ground safely. And welcome to Pattonville Airfield, a small regional airfield very near the place I live. Alright, so you've now seen the first flying vlog in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. You can expect plenty more content to come with the new... oh boy. Let's try and stop before hitting the pump here. You can expect plenty more content to come with the new Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. This is a really fun sim, and I've already given you my thoughts on it, and I'm really interested in seeing how this develops over the course of the next few years and what sort of add-ons get released. And yeah, in general, this is going to be a really fun and interesting way of experiencing a really fun and interesting new type of flying and flight simulators. Thanks for joining, and safe travels, blue skies, and many happy landings.